There's been a sensation inside me that I could never fully explain. It was as if my soul bore an invisible weight, a silent responsibility that the world around me seemed to overlook. As a child, I watched the people around me laughing, playing, going about their routines with a natural ease that I couldn't quite grasp. Meanwhile, a quiet presence made me feel that my existence didn't fully belong to that space, that reality. I looked up at the sky, at objects, and had the impression that something more was waiting for me beyond what my eyes could see, a whispering voice inside me, one that seemed to belong to ancient wisdom, told me that it wasn't time to understand yet, but that my journey was different. I felt like a stranger in my own world, carrying a restlessness that silently consumed me. I grew up with this feeling that there was more than what my mind could perceive, a kind of connection to something greater, an invisible force pulling me into a deep silence where questions were stronger than answers. The nights were the worst because my heart raced when I tried to understand what I was feeling. And in that quiet, this inner voice became clearer. There's something you haven't seen yet, something that will change everything. Even today, that sensation remains with me, like a shadow never leaving, reminding me that my journey here was not just a coincidence, but a preparation for something greater that awaits my soul. In my childhood, my home was like a silent field where unspoken words echoed louder than any open dialogue. My relationship with my parents, especially, was characterized by a heavy silence, almost like a curtain of smoke draping over everything. These weren't loud disagreements or explicit conflicts. Rather, the absence of genuine communication created a vast distance between what we felt and what we showed. My father, a quiet and concerned man, rarely expressed his emotions. Whenever he did, his words carried the weight of insecurity and fear. And my mother, in turn, retreated even further into her own pain, as if silence was the only way to survive in that cold environment. I kept trying to understand what was wrong, why it was so difficult to say what we truly felt. I felt like a stranger, trying to decipher the signs of a relationship that seemed made of hollow echoes. Many times, I found myself listening to the sounds of silence, trying to pick up some message hidden behind the thick walls of our house. The lack of open dialogue fostered a sense of emptiness that seeped into my soul, like a wound that never healed. My heart longed for genuine love, for words that conveyed acceptance and understanding, but all I received were distant glances and gestures of loneliness. As time went on, this turned into a silent pain, an internal void I carried like a heavy backpack. This relationship of incompleteness caused me, from a young age, to seek something beyond what my family could offer. A hope to fill that emptiness with greater understanding, a spiritual connection I did not yet know, but always felt as a promise of something to come. From my very first steps, the sensation that there was something more I needed to discover never left me. It was an invisible thirst, a constant restlessness that lodged itself deep within my being, like a flame that never extinguished. This anxiety did not stem from common worries or fleeting interests. It was something that transcended any rational explanation. At night, when everything fell silent, my mind flooded with unanswered questions. Why? For what purpose? What is the meaning of all this? It seemed as if my soul was searching for seeds of hope, light, or some answer I had yet to access. And this search turned into an almost physical anxiety that consumed me. And so, night after night, this desperate longing grew stronger. The silence of my soul cried out for something I still lacked words to describe. A deep desire to understand my existence, to uncover a higher reason behind all the pain, all the doubt. This thirst grew with me, creating a sense that my life was not merely a succession of empty days, but a journey laden with an invisible urgency. I felt I needed to embark on an inner quest, something beyond external experiences, a voyage only my soul could undertake. What I didn't know at the time was that this insatiable thirst was a sign that my spiritual journey still had much to teach me. That all that anxiety, that restlessness, was an invisible preparation for something that would change my life forever. A profound transformation that would begin at a moment I could never have imagined. As the years went by, the silent pains grew within me, forming an emotional storm that seemed ready to burst. Irreparable losses, rejections, moments of overwhelming vulnerability. All of these left deep marks on my soul. Each pain seemed to root itself deeper, becoming an open wound I carried with me, often without knowing exactly how to heal it. The feeling of helplessness was constant. I sensed that my emotions were like waves crashing against an invisible rock, leaving scars that no words could fully describe. In the silence of that inner chaos, my nights avoided true rest, consumed by painful memories and doubts that insisted on remaining alive. Every trauma, every loss, felt like a cruel reminder that something fundamental within me had broken, creating an emptiness that grew more difficult to endure each day. In my mind, storms formed, a mixture of anger, sadness, fear, and loneliness. These emotions piled up like a dark cloud threatening to turn into a destructive tempest. No one was there to share these burdens, and no matter how much I tried to hide my wounds, they persisted in crying out for attention. I carried silently an invisible pain that consumed me from the inside, one that seemed to be the reason for my desperate search for something greater, a hope that my story could still change, that light could pierce through that sea of darkness. And in that moment of vulnerability, I realized that these traumas, no matter how painful, were part of a greater lesson, an opportunity for growth, an invisible preparation to transform that entire internal storm into strength and hope. I felt more and more like a shadow wandering aimlessly, a lost soul in the vastness of its own doubts. It was as if an invisible force was trying to drag me into a bottomless abyss, a place where hope seemed completely extinguished. Every day was an invisible battle against an internal pressure that sought to convince me that my destiny was failure, eternal loneliness, or an empty existence. The feeling of drift increased. I fought against this invisible weight, clinging to anything that could give me meaning, a dream, a hope, a whispered prayer in the darkness of the night. But often, it felt as if my soul was lost inside a dark labyrinth, where shadows of doubt grew exponentially, threatening to consume me entirely. My mind filled with negative thoughts, convinced that my fight was useless, that perhaps my hope was slowly dying within the dull silence. I saw myself as a traveler without a destination, captured by a force trying to pull me toward a sense of hopelessness, that nothing would change, that everything was an illusion. Still, a small spark of resistance remained, whispering that there was something beyond that abyss, something that could save me if I only dared to believe. It became a constant struggle, my heart fighting to resist the invisible force, and my mind seeking hope amidst the darkness trying to swallow me. Despite everything, even at my darkest moment, I felt my journey was not yet over, that this shadow was not my permanent dwelling, but a passage, a silent preparation for something greater, an opportunity to break free from those invisible shackles and find the light that, one day, even in the densest darkness, would reignite. Every day, the sensation that I was fighting against an invisible shadow grew stronger. My routine turned into a silent war, each morning arriving loaded with anxiety, each night bringing the fear that everything could end there, without warning, without explanation. It was as if I were in a hidden war, fought inside myself, where the conflicts were invisible to the world, but devastating to my soul. Fear became a constant partner. It disguised itself as thoughts, small doubts that transformed into ghosts haunting my mind. It wasn't a common fear that passes with time, but an almost palpable dread that ignited chronic anxiety, making me feel imprisoned inside an invisible cell. Each step felt like a risky bet, an attempt to hold on to hope that seemed faint, almost fragile enough to shatter against the internal storms I still faced. At the same time, an inner strength told me that this battle was not in vain, that all of this was part of a process, of a preparation that, although shrouded in darkness, would bring a greater light at the end of the road. The journey, despite being so difficult, began to show me that my resilience, that silent effort not to give up, was what kept me standing, even when everything around me seemed to be collapsing. My soul, with all its fragility, carried a hidden strength that I would later understand as part of a transformation only time could reveal. It was as if a dense fog of sorrow had infiltrated every corner of my being. I felt completely vulnerable, exposed to forces beyond my control. A profound sense of isolation took over, as if the world around me was a vast emptiness, and I, a small and fragile figure isolated within this almost deadly silence. Loneliness seemed greater than I could bear, an intense pain that made me want to run away, disappear, hide in the darkest shadow I could find. At that instant, I realized that the abandonment I carried was not only external, but also internal, a soul crying out for hope, but trapped in its own sadness. It felt like everything I had built or tried to hold on to had crumbled, leaving me adrift, without direction or comfort. Each tear that fell felt like a cruel reminder that I was myself distancing from any possibility of salvation, and in that moment, a cruel doubt settled in. Will this sadness ever go away? Will my soul remain forever trapped in this dark space? Yet, even in the deepest vulnerability, a small spark of resistance tried to stay alive. I knew, instinctively, that this pain was also part of a journey, a phase that would prepare me for something greater. The pain of abandonment, of loneliness, was like a storm that had to pass, a trial that, though cruel, would give me enough strength to fight for a future I did not yet see. And it was in this darkness that a silent hope began to emerge, like a faint light whispering that my journey still had a purpose. In that moment of greatest vulnerability, when everything seemed on the verge of collapsing, something inside me began to stir. A small, faint light, nearly invisible, appeared on the horizon of my mind, like a candle burning in the deepest darkness. It was a silent hope, a subtle expression of something that still resisted the chaos surrounding me. This light was not bright, did not call attention with grandeur. It was delicate, almost like a calligraphy of peace inscribed within my soul, as a whispered promise. Everything will change. It was a fragile feeling, like a drop of dew, slipping from the leaves in the late morning, yet so real that it made me question everything I believed to be impossible. The force awakening inside me seemed to want to pull me toward a place of tranquility, even amidst fear, even in the deepest darkness. I felt that this silent whisper was a warning not to give up, that despite everything, there was an exit, a chance for transformation, even if it was still hidden in the shadow of the unknown. From that moment on, I realized that, no matter how small hope might seem, it held immense power. Like a tiny spark, it could become a blazing fire capable of illuminating the path. It was a silent certainty that all that crisis, that fear, that weight, would serve as instruments of profound change. And even if my eyes still saw darkness ahead, my soul began to understand that all of this was part of a preparation for a greater new beginning. In that almost final moment, between desperate fear and faint hope, I recognized that a greater force than my understanding was beginning to manifest. It was like an energy that enveloped everything, a presence that seemed to pulse within, my essence, as if my soul was being touched by something beyond the physical world. In that mysterious connection, I felt a subtle movement, almost a whisper, telling me that my existence was not by chance, and that all the pain, all the darkness, had a reason to be. Fear insisted on trying to dominate my mind, but an invisible force started to grow inside me. A vibration that, slowly, sought to turn terror into courage, despair into a greater hope. It was as if the entire universe's strength was concentrated at that moment of crisis, a healing and renewing energy. On one hand, I wanted to escape that state of vulnerability and fear. On the other, I felt an irresistible attraction to understand it all, to surrender to this force that seemed to envelop me in a layer of love and indescribable strength. And precisely at that moment, a certainty began to take shape. All of this, the shadows, the whispers, the fear, was not an end, but a beginning. An opportunity to break free from the invisible chains that held me in darkness and to make room for a new start quietly taking shape. Like an unseen bridge, that greater energy seemed to invite me to trust, to surrender, to allow renewed hope to fill my heart. It told me that, even in the deepest darkness, there is a force capable of transforming everything. You only need to stop resisting and open your heart to the light that has always been there, concealed in its greatest stillness. In that decisive moment, between the darkness of fear and the light of hope, I felt a force that seemed to envelop my entire being. It was like an invisible current, an energy that tried to pull my soul into a bottomless abyss, a silent attempt to swallow me into eternal darkness. Fear once again whispered that everything was over, that there was no more salvation. But at that instant, a counteracting force, a silent mercy, arose around me, like a golden light radiating hope. I felt myself being dragged toward an emptiness, while my emotions struggled between letting go or resisting. Yet, deep down, I realized that all of it, the terror, the shadows, the hope, was a battle for my soul, a moment of choosing. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a force of love and rebirth emerged from within me, like a light that never extinguishes in the deepest darkness. The feeling that everything might be lost was replaced by a certainty. This was not the end, but a new beginning, an opportunity to be reborn. I knew in that moment that everything I had experienced, the pains, the fear, the shadows, had a purpose. Each suffering was a seed of transformation, a preparation for a greater ascent. And with that understanding, my soul filled with courage, with a desire to fight, to trust in the strength of a love greater than anything else. That night, before me, lay a subtle but powerful promise. The light is always waiting for those who have faith to recognize it at the right moment. And if I could learn one thing, it was that even in the greatest darkness, there exists a spark of hope capable of illuminating everything. You only need to open your heart to receive it. It was as if, in an instant, everything around me transformed. A feeling of weight and lightness intertwined within me, a duality so intense that my senses became confused. On one side, the weight, like an invisible burden pulling me downward, a force seemingly intent on anchoring my soul to what remained of my body. On the other, an almost supernatural lightness that uplifted me, like a feather drifting in the wind, lifted by a silent, subtle current, almost untouchable. This sensation screamed in my mind that something had been broken, that I was leaving behind my physical limitations. It was as if a dark, silent force had gently grasped my shoulders, pulling my essence beyond the material world, guiding me along paths my physical body could never reach. Everything around me began to dim, not into simple darkness, but into a vibrant shadow filled with mystery and threat. This invisible force dragged me toward places my eyes could not see, as if I was being pulled into a limbo between heaven and earth, an indefinite space with no beginning and no end. While fear crept in, a strange peace settled deep within my heart. It was as if my soul, finally, was freeing itself from an invisible prison, leaving behind pain, trauma, and limitations. Despite the sensation of weight, my mind grew lighter and lighter, like a feather carried by the wind, gently floating towards something I could not see. I had a clear impression that everything, that silent, powerful movement, was a passage, a transition that would carry me beyond what I knew. It was as if, from that moment onward, I was being pulled into a dimension of silence, of mystery, a force that, even if frightening, brought a sense of peace, like a promise of liberation. That feeling lasted seconds, or maybe hours. I wouldn't be able to tell. But what remained was the certainty that my soul had begun a journey that would change everything forever, leaving behind the weight of the world I had carried until then, like a feather in the wind, carried by a force guiding me beyond the limits of what my eyes could perceive. As my consciousness began to detach from what had been my body, I started to notice a strange scene, full of details that, in normal life, might have gone unnoticed. But there, everything seemed charged with an unsettling aura. That darkness was not empty. Rather, it moved with a life of its own, as if alive, breathing. Distorted figures appeared and disappeared in my peripheral vision, shadows that dragged themselves slowly, as if they had a will of their own. Their outlines were diffuse, made of a hazy smoke that warped and shifted, and their eyes held an emptiness, void of life, but full of a threatening presence. In the absolute silence, I could hear a whisper almost inaudible, like muffled voices, coming from all directions at once. These voices had no clear words, but their tone carried an undercurrent of unease and fear. I sensed that something, or someone, was watching my transformation closely, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The feeling was that my entrance into this invisible world was unwelcome, like an intruder who invaded an abandoned house, inhabited by beings hiding quietly in the shadows. My senses were hyperactive. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow more alive, more present. A feeling of threatening presence infiltrated every fiber of my being. It was frightening, but at the same time, there was a strange attraction, an irresistible curiosity about the nature of these creatures. Like a reluctant spectator, I sensed that I was on the threshold between two worlds, those I knew and those now revealing themselves, full of mysteries and dangers. That transitional stage was, without a doubt, one of the most terrifying I had ever experienced because, even though everything was silent, I could feel the pounding of something not of this world, a kind of alert that something was waiting there, silently, ready to reveal itself. As everything around me seemed to envelop itself in shadows, a deadly sense of calm took over. It was a peace that, while embracing me, also deeply frightened me. I floated within the vastness of this darkness, like a drop of water detaching from a waterfall, hovering in the void, indifferent to the fear that was beginning to settle in. However, this peace was not ordinary. It was a calm that seemed beyond any human understanding, a kind of absolute silence where pain and suffering appeared to dissolve, giving way to a sense of complete surrender. Yet this tranquility had a price, a black shadow lurking in my mind, like a latent threat. It was a peace that carried the duality of an almost paralyzing fear. I increasingly realized that this moment of calm was also a crossing, a suspended state between what I knew and what I had yet to comprehend. Much like a bridge that led me beyond everything I feared to face, this feeling of deadly peace tried to make me accept a destiny that seemed predestined. But, at the same time, within this heavy silence, an inner voice whispered that this peace could be my liberation, a call to abandon fear, pain, and doubt, and to embrace a new reality. It was an ambivalent feeling, a mixture of relief and apprehension, that what seemed to be a sensation of ending was, in fact, a passage, a chance for rebirth from the depths of darkness. The most frightening part was realizing that, even as everything seemed to fade away, a spark of hope still resisted, like a timid light flickering in the midst of that sea of shadows, waiting for a chance to shine. Suddenly, an intense light emerged in front of me, breaking through the density of the darkness that surrounded me. It was a bright, almost blinding light, but it seemed to possess a force of its own, an energy that vibrated in a way I couldn't fully understand. While my eyes were irresistibly drawn to it, a feeling of unease settled deep within me. The future seemed to be illuminated yet simultaneously frightening. This light was not comforting as one might imagine. Its blazing radiance, though beautiful, carried a disturbing vibration, an energy that seemed to promise hope as much as it concealed hidden danger. It was like a seductive promise and a veiled threat, a door open to something that could set me free, but also consume me if I wasn't careful. Shadows around it appeared to dance and shift, forming shapes that tried to capture my attention. Figures of light and darkness intertwined, both pulsating with an intensity that throbbed strongly within me. I realized that this light, though radiant, was not merely a phenomenon. It was an incomprehensible force of power, charged with contradictory emotions, an invitation to transcendence, and at the same time a warning that, here, something far greater than my understanding was unfolding. My mind tried to grasp it, but everything seemed like an enigma, an ambiguity that stirred my soul and brought a mixture of fascination and fear. The feeling of vulnerability grew stronger as my senses tried to absorb that energy. It was as if, in its beauty, it concealed a silent warning. Be careful. The path you are on now is full of dangers and revelations, but also hope. The choice is yours. In that instant, I realized that the temptation of that light was the ultimate test of my transition journey, a chance for illumination or a trap of darkness. As my steps, or rather, my perception, moved toward that pulsating light, I realized I was not alone. On its outskirts, shadowy figures manifested, indistinct creatures, silhouettes deformed by an emptiness that seemed eager to swallow everything. They were beings of darkness, frightening in their appearance, as uncertain as I was, with hollow eyes and hesitant expressions, moving slowly as if pondering whether to hinder me or aid me. Some of these shadows behaved aggressively, trying to block my way, while others merely remained silent, observing with piercing attention, as if analyzing my soul. They seemed to reflect my deepest fears, my uncertainty about what awaited me, crafted from a dark, viscous energy. Some of these creatures appeared hesitant, shifting toward me in a near indecisiveness, caught in a limbo of affirmation or denial. I sensed within them an internal conflict, a part of a world trying to define itself, a duality of forces engaged in a fierce battle at the threshold of the unknown. My senses sharpened. Fear, fascination, doubt, all intensified, for I perceived that all this was a reflection of myself, of my state of soul in that moment of transition. To cross that barrier, strength alone was not enough. I had to understand that these beings were not my enemies, but messages from a world that exists between light and shadow. Every indecisive figure seemed to carry a story, a doubt, a desire for change, or a yearning to remain. Even wrapped in darkness, I realized that this scene was part of a test. Would my courage to advance despite fear prevail, or would I accept remaining in the shadow? The answer, in that moment, seemed to depend on my own inner decision. In the midst of this scene of intertwined shadows and light, my attention was drawn to figures emerging like a frame of pulsating energy. They were spiritual beings, some radiating a radiant golden light, others with a darker energy, almost reflecting the duality that pulsed around them. Their bodies were undefined, their forms oscillating between human and ethereal, as if they were manifestations of a greater force that transcends any earthly understanding. Some of these beings emanated a vibration of unconditional love, radiating warmth that seemed to fill all the darkness surrounding me. Their eyes shone with empathetic light, as if they understood every one of my emotions, doubts, and pains. These entities appeared to transmit a silent message of hope, that everything here was a bridge, a passage that, despite the dangers, led to something greater, more true. However, at the same time, I sensed that this very space was disturbed by a different energy, a denser vibration, laden with doubts and conflicting emotions. Some of these entities carried an aura of restlessness, of uncertainty, as if they were still trapped between two worlds, between love and fear, between light and darkness. Their faces, no matter how beautiful, bore an expression of anguish, an invisible struggle reflecting the state of my own soul in that moment. At that instant, I understood that they were not merely guides or traditional beings of light, but manifestations of a more complex journey, where the space between darkness and light was permeated by intertwined human and spiritual emotions, and all this vibration carried a message. In that space, transformation was possible. Hope, no matter how faint, was the bridge connecting shadow to the greater light that everyone carried within themselves. Suddenly, a tumultuous series of images started to unfold before me. Each scene was like a lightning bolt slicing through the darkness, revealing moments of pain, losses, and conflicts I had carried within myself for years. They were flashes of memories, failures, harsh words, times when I felt abandoned and vulnerable. These scenes appeared almost involuntarily, as if an invisible mirror was reflecting everything I tried to hide most of the time. They gained strength, emanating from inside me, as if my deepest emotions were being rewritten by a higher force. I felt each pain, each fear, as if I were reliving everything. The separation from someone I loved, moments of betrayal, tears hidden at night. It was an overwhelming sensation, as if my soul was being pierced by a flood of old emotions, relentlessly, keeping me chained to the past. The anguish of seeing all of this so alive and present seemed like a trap, but at the same time, I perceived that those moments were parts of a greater whole I needed to understand. They were my open wounds, but also seeds of a healing that could come, like a faint light at the back of a dark cave. A silent hope flickered within my soul, reminding me that all of that, all pain, all sadness, served a greater transformation. And in that scene of shadows, I realized that perhaps my past difficulties were merely steps toward true liberation, an opportunity to be reborn stronger, carrying with me everything that had been painful and learning to forgive and free myself. As my visions unfolded, I noticed the shadows around me growing denser and more aggressive. Their outlines became sharper, dark figures, swelling, almost like invisible hands trying to close in around me, forming a web of terror that seemed to consume me entirely. These shadows, which had previously been indecisive and hesitant, now assumed a menacing presence, attempting to imprison me in the darkness, as if they wanted to keep me in this limbo of fear forever. I felt their cold heat invade my body like an invisible pressure trying to suffocate me, to prevent me from moving forward, from breaking free from that prison of shadows. It was a force of containment, an energy feeding fear, mixing doubts and despair. Every movement of these entities seemed like an attempt to drag me into a place of surrender, a trap that my soul would need to resist with all its strength to escape. But at the same time, I realized that this apparent threat had a purpose. I knew that all of this was not eternal punishment, but a phase of testing, a trial of strength, courage, and faith. It was an opportunity to confront my greatest fears, to recognize the shadows that dwell within me, and to understand that they only held power if I allowed it. And at that moment, a silent courage arose. Even amid so much darkness, my will to move forward strengthened. I understood that the true challenge was not to escape the shadows, but to learn to face them with love and acceptance. Like a light that refuses to go out in the night, my hope persisted, fueling the certainty that all that terror was temporary, a stage that, if overcome, would lead me to a next phase of liberation and light. I was immersed in that silent battle against the shadows when, suddenly, an almost inaudible whisper echoed in my mind. A voice that seemed to emerge from an ancient place, laden with hidden secrets and warnings. It didn't come from a visible entity, but from a force that penetrated my consciousness, as if someone or something was trying to alert me with words that made no sense, but carried a weight of threat and mystery. That voice whispered secrets that sent shivers down my spine. The words were vague, but imbued with a clear message. Be careful. This journey is not over yet. You are on a bridge between two worlds, and what comes next will determine your final destiny. Amid the silence, I was able to catch the tone of warning, a mixture of invitation and threat. It was a veiled caution that what seemed to be my destruction was merely a doorway to a new stage of transformation. My heart raced intensely. The power of that voice, though silent, seemed to pierce my soul, like an ancient secret that only my consciousness could hear, yet carrying the weight of a warning. As if standing at a crossroads, between liberation and eternal slavery, I realized that this message was a point of decisive choice. I could not ignore it. At that moment, my soul understood that the next step would define everything that had come before. And in that silence, a faint hope was born. Like a spark igniting in the darkness, the certainty that pleading for strength, courage, or protection had to come from within myself. I knew that that whisper was a bridge of learning, of choice, and of an opportunity to break free from shadows and embrace the light that, even in the gloom, continued to wait. For me, in that final moment of the silent battle, I realized that a powerful force was beginning to manifest deep within me. It was like an energy of love emerging from the depths, breaking through the veil of darkness that sought to hold me back. A force carrying promises of liberation, change, and rebirth. This energy grew slowly, carving out space within my soul until I could feel its dominant presence. A light filled with hope, seemingly eager to pull me out of that abyss of darkness. For what felt like an eternity, I was filled with an indescribable feeling, a mixture of fear of abandoning what I already knew, combined with a greater hope than any resistance. It was a silent fight, a battle between what kept me in darkness and what propelled me toward the light. Shadows tried to hold me. Threatening voices tried to persuade me to give up. But at that moment, the greater force triumphed. The light appeared stronger, brighter, like a promise of liberation from everything that bound me. I realized that all the pain, fear, darkness, and shadows were merely part of the process, a necessary phase of transformation. And at that moment, my soul understood that the greatest power had always been within me, ready to activate at the right time. With this renewed strength, I felt a new stage beginning. My journey back, of rebirth, hope, and love. I believed that, even in the deepest darkness, a spark of light awaits those brave enough to trust. And all that battle was, at its core, a test. A chance to choose the path leading to true freedom, that of the soul itself, which even in its greatest vulnerability, can always rise again and shine brighter than ever. Opening my eyes after that experience was like awakening from a deep dream, yet laden with a sensation of weight and relief simultaneously. As I returned to my physical body, my senses were still in a state of confusion, as if the world around me was a distant memory, a recollection of a place where peace and terror had intertwined. The first feeling was of relief, almost as if I wanted to cry, to thank for being back, for still being able to feel the warmth of the sun on my skin, and for breathing air that, although heavy, had once again enveloped me. But soon, I realized that this return would not be easy. It was as if an invisible force still carried a burden of responsibility, a weight that pressed upon me, and called me to a profound reflection. The weight was not physical, but spiritual. A force that seemed to bear down on my soul. A reminder of everything I had passed through, everything that had been revealed, the shadows I had faced. It was a force that made me feel an enormous internal impact. A power that carried a commitment to change, to evolve, to not let all of that be just a memory, but a lesson I would carry for life. My vision was still blurry, my head throbbing, but my soul felt renewed, stronger, like someone who rises from a cycle of destruction and rebirth. At the same time, a sense of responsibility settled deep within me. That experience was not just a story of overcoming, but an invitation to a greater mission. I had passed through a door that few had access to, and this return brought a silent strength in the belief that it all had a purpose, to help others, to transmit hope, and to show that light can emerge even in the darkest darkness. So, with a heavy heart yet full of hope, I perceived that this return to the physical world was only the beginning of a new journey, a journey of transformation that I would carry forever. As I regained consciousness, I sensed that something had changed around me. The color palette, the atmosphere, even the silence that surrounded me, all carried a different vibration. It was as if the very air was charged with a subtle energy that was neither entirely hope nor entirely fear. Both coexisted at the same time in a silent dance within my heart. I looked around and realized that, despite being back in the physical world, my soul bore an indelible mark of that experience. Hope shimmered in some corners, like a faint, fragile, yet persistent light, while the seeds of fear still attempted to infiltrate my mind. It was a sensation of duality, where light and darkness remained side by side, like two forces fighting for space within me. In the first moments, everything seemed to be in a kind of suspension, an unspoken waiting for answers. I was aware that nothing would be the same again, that my view of the world had been radically transformed, carrying the unease that each breath now held a greater meaning. That energy of hope pushed me to understand that what I had experienced during the near-death was not mere illusion or dream, but a bridge between what is and what can be. I felt that hope, no matter how faint, had shown me a path of renewal, something that invited me to keep believing, even as fear tried to trap me in anxiety. The vibration of that moment was proof that my soul still carried a force of resistance, of faith, and of love, capable of transforming any darkness into light. And there, in its delicate intensity, I realized that all of that was preparation for an even greater phase of my journey, returning to live with a new vision and a renewed hope that, even in the deepest darkness, there is always a light waiting to emerge. As I opened my eyes and felt the weight of the world around me, I detected that something within me had changed irrevocably. The feeling of hope that had taken hold shortly after my return was powerful, almost too real to ignore. It was as if a silent flame had been ignited within my essence, a light that refused to go out, even in the face of the burden of days, physical pain, and the doubts that inevitably arise when resuming life's routine. This hope was not a fleeting idea or superficial optimism. It solidified as a constant presence in my mind and heart. It was a force carrying the certainty that my experience, though traumatic and frightening, had been a bridge of learning and transformation. Even with physical limitations or doubts that attacked me with each new day, the energy of hope remained steadfast, fueling a greater desire to move forward, to seek meaning in every small detail, to value each breath as a precious gift. I perceived that this force of hope did not come solely from external sources, but from within me. A part of my soul that, after crossing the darkness, now carried a mission: to renew my strength, to share my story, and to help others find a spark of light, even in the greatest darkness. That feeling was a living reminder that my essence harbored a light that neither time nor pain could extinguish. Perhaps, now stronger than ever, my greatest mission was to nurture this hope, transform it into action, and celebrate each moment of life with the certainty that my journey, in some way, had a greater purpose: to spread hope, love, and light to those still seeking an escape from darkness. Reflecting on everything I had lived through, now marked by an invisible scar, I realized that the losses and pains of the past were more than obstacles. They were essential to my transformation. Each pain, each disappointment, had been a rung on the ladder of my evolution, shaping a new understanding of myself and of life. In those moments of silence, I understood that my story of suffering was one of the greatest forces driving me to rebuild my hope. All those things that seemed like irreparable losses were, in truth, parts of a grand metamorphosis happening within me. Like a chrysalis closing to transform into a butterfly, each emotional scar I carried prepared me for something greater, stronger, and more genuine. The path of pain paradoxically became a source of strength, courage, and freedom. Every tear, every difficult moment, sharpened my resolve to move forward, to refuse letting fear or pain destroy me entirely. The certainty born from within me now was that nothing, absolutely nothing, could erase what my soul had learned: that there is always hope, even in the greatest adversity, even in the deepest darkness. There is a seed of light ready to bloom. It is this profound understanding that gave me the necessary push to embrace life with a stronger, more conscious heart full of love. My metamorphosis had solidified. My pains, once seen as obstacles, are now testament to a journey of strength, confirming that even in the fiercest storms, hope can be reborn and transform everything. Today, looking back, I recognize with absolute certainty that the greatest victory of my journey was the courage to overcome the fear that consumed me from within. There were nights of anguish, doubt, and profound sadness, but in the end, they carried within them a seed of hope. Every moment of darkness was an opportunity to realize that my soul was stronger than any shadow trying to engulf me. I realized that fear, no matter how overwhelming it seemed on the surface, was simply an invitation to transformation. Like a spark reigniting a blaze, it was the starting point for me to discover an inner strength I never imagined I possessed. Those dark nights, which seemed insurmountable, became seeds of a greater rebirth, a chance to be reborn with more love, more faith, and more certainty that my journey had a purpose. I understood that fear was not an enemy, but a disguised teacher, a lesson that true strength comes from within, and that self-love, hope, and faith are the most powerful tools to traverse any darkness. These experiences of fear and pain served to teach my soul to trust in its intrinsic light, which never extinguished, even in the most challenging moments. Today, I am fully convinced that my greatest victory was to turn internal obstacles into strength, transforming fear into courage and pain into resilience. My story reveals that, even in the deepest darkness, there is a spark of light capable of illuminating the entire path, a light that never goes out, as long as it remains alive in the heart. And this certainty fills me with hope that my journey, like that of many, is a cycle of rebirth, where the greatest victory will always be the love we carry for ourselves. Today, I am fully aware that that force which arose within me during the darkest moment was a valuable lesson. Shadows do not exist to destroy us, but to teach us how to strengthen our inner light. I understood that every darkness we face is a natural stage of our growth, a necessary phase for our soul to evolve and discover its true purpose. No one needs to fear the shadows, for they are also part of the cycle of life. They are like the night that prepares the soil for the sunrise, or like a seed that needs shadow to germinate. The only way to overcome them is to keep moving forward, with faith, hope, and courage, believing that after every storm, there is always a rainbow waiting to light the way. This understanding changed my perception of difficult moments. They are not punishments, but opportunities to learn, to transform, and to strengthen our essence. Every fear, every pain, is a fundamental piece in building a more conscious and fulfilled journey. When we face these moments with faith in our inner strength, we discover that we can cross any darkness because our light is greater than any shadow. Today, I carry with me this deep certainty. Even in the longest nights, hope never fades. All it takes is perseverance, trusting ourselves, and moving forward, because, in the end, rebirth is inevitable. A chance to restart stronger, more conscious, and more illuminated. Thus, I realize that true strength resides within each of us, waiting only for the courage to awaken it at the right time. Today, as I look back, I have absolute confidence that my greatest victory was overcoming the fear that often seemed insurmountable. Each restless night, each silent tear, became the seed of an inner strength that grew quietly and powerfully. Over time, I realized that fear, at its core, was not an enemy. It was a messenger telling me that something greater needed to be awakened within me. It was an opportunity to learn to trust my own strength, to learn to love my journey, even in its darkest hours. These nights of torment, which seemed endless, were in fact a preparation for a profound transformation. Like a seed that needs to endure the cold to blossom, my soul was forged in resistance, and every fear conquered became a foundational stone for a more conscious, stronger, and hope-filled life. Thus, I discovered that my dark nights were not signs of defeat, but seeds of a greater rebirth, more significant than I had ever imagined. Once we open the door to confidence in ourselves, nothing can prevent our light from shining brighter, even against shadows trying to overpower us. Now, carrying this certainty, I fill my heart with hope. I know that the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to face our own darkness, transforming it into light. What once seemed like an end was, in truth, the beginning of a journey of love, faith, and renewal. With this understanding, I move forward, knowing that even in the quietest, longest nights, there is a spark of hope that never goes out. It simply waits for the right moment to resurface stronger, wiser, and more illuminated. Today, I am fully certain that that force which was born within me in the darkest moment was a precious lesson. Shadows are not enemies, but companions on our journey. They are part of the cycle of life, just as night is part of day. I learned that our greatest tests often occur when everything seems to fall apart, and it is precisely in those moments that our essence is strengthened. No one needs to fear the shadows, for they are merely the necessary path for growth, an opportunity to mature, to learn to trust our inner light. They are like seeds that need to endure cold and shade to germinate and flourish stronger. The only way out is to keep going, head held high, with faith in our strength, hope for the future, and courage to face each challenge. I've come to understand that darkness is transient, just as night gives way to dawn. Every shadow we confront is an opportunity to meet ourselves, to discover that within us there is an infinite universe of light and love. When we choose to move forward with faith, even in the face of fear, we realize that nothing can truly destroy us, because deep down, we are light by essence, and this light never goes out. It only waits for the courage to reveal itself. So even when nights seem eternal, remember, the most important thing is to keep going. The light we hold within us is greater than any shadow, and rebirth begins precisely in the courage to walk toward hope, even in the deepest darkness. After all, only in this way can we truly grow, evolve, and discover that we are capable of turning any night into a new dawn. As I reflect on my journey, I realize that my greatest victory was precisely the courage to face the fear that tried to consume me. Every night of anguish, every doubt, every silent tear, unilaterally, became the seeds of a strength no one can take away from me. This strength was born in darkness, fed by the desire to survive, to find hope within pain. I've learned that fear, no matter how terrifying, is an opportunity for growth, a call to self-awareness. I became conscious that, by confronting it, I was building a bridge toward my essence, toward true self-love. My darkest nights, which sometimes seemed endless, were, in fact, the fertile ground for my greatest metamorphosis, just as a seed needs darkness to germinate. My pains and doubts shaped me for my greatest resurrection. I am certain that the greatest triumph in life lies in our ability to overcome fear and transform darkness into light. Every night I faced has strengthened me to now illuminate the path for those still on the journey of hope. Our true strength comes from within, and it only grows in adversity. I believe my story is a testament that, even in the deepest darkness, there is a spark of light that never goes out. It simply needs courage to shine brightly once again. And so, I continue with hope and faith, carrying my experience as a certainty that we are capable of rebirth, of transforming our pains into hope, and of discovering within ourselves a light greater than any shadow. Because in the end, our greatest victory is precisely this: always being able to start over with a heart full of love and hope. Deep within my soul, I discovered that the true secret of life is the courage to always begin again. Regardless of falls, the longest nights, or the densest shadows, there is a force within each of us that never extinguishes: the hope for a new day, the faith in our ability to transform pain into love and fear into courage. Everything I've lived through, the pain, the fears, the shadows, has become a story of overcoming that I carry as a precious treasure. I learned that what matters most on the journey is not the absence of difficulties, but the willingness to move forward with hope in our hearts. My greatest victory was believing that, even when everything seems lost, the inner light never fully goes out. It only waits for the right moment to shine brighter. Understanding this, I realized that the essence of life is exactly that: the eternal capacity to rebirth, to overcome oneself, to trust in our own strength and in the love we carry. Each dark night, each silent tear, each fear faced was a step toward greater freedom. And today, I can say with full certainty, in the walk of life, the most important thing is not to avoid falls, but to have the courage to rise, to trust oneself, and to start over whenever necessary. Because in the end, the greatest victory we can achieve is this: to believe that within us there is a light that never fades, and that, with faith, hope, and love, we can transform any tragedy into a beautiful story of rebirth. And this message is an invitation to everyone: never give up. Keep seeking, loving, and trusting in your own light, because it has the power to illuminate the way back home, always.
If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share this video with someone who needs a message of hope and light. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring content like this. Together, we can spread love and awareness beyond this life.